Hey everyone, today we have our one of our favorite guests, author Jon D'Amore, who I believe Kelly holds the record for being on our podcast the most thus
Yeah.
far, right?
Yeah. He's so busy. He just has so much to share.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Periodically comes on when he's got a new book, and he
Yeah.
has a new book coming out, right, Jon?
Yep. Yep.
And he's going to tell us about it, I'm sure.
Mhm. That's the
What's
plan.
new? What's new with you, Jon?
Wow. Well, like you said, there's a new book coming out right about now, which is around February 22nd. And but there's a reason why it's coming out on February 22nd.
If you like our videos, go ahead and click on like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
You know why?
Someone's
President's Day?
Say that again.
President's Day?
Well, President's Day technically is, I believe, earlier than that, but it has something to do
George
with
Washington.
with the two presidents that were honored with February birthdays. So one of them obviously is George Washington, and the name of my new book is Me and George,
Aha.
which I'm sure Kimbra will agree that a lot of people over the last year, since I've been writing it, when they'd say, you know, what's the name of your book? What are you working on? And they'd say it's a book called Me and George. Of course, it's not a true story, but people thought that I was writing a book about me and George Harrison
Right.
because of my my love of the Beatles. So everybody thought that, and I didn't want to blow that, and I just said, yeah, maybe that's it. We'll go with that. But now that with the cover and everything of the book, and the people who are already out there who read the advanced copies that are talking about it, we know now that it's George Washington.
Right. You can't fool everyone.
Yeah.
No.
Well, seeing the cover. And by the way, your covers are always amazing.
Yeah.
It's a great cover. And your profiles. I can't wait to hear all about it.
You put a lot of thought into detail as well as the music that goes with it, which I really like,
Yeah. There's songs, there's music, technically throughout the entire book. People are listening to music or songs that are playing in the background of a restaurant, just to give you that feeling of being there.
Right.
I found that it works.
Yeah.
As long as it's music I like.
That's right.
So is it a political book? Is it about politics?
Well, you can't bring the first president from the literally 2 weeks after he had been inaugurated president in 1789. You can't bring that person into 2022 and have him observe things and not discuss political things. Obviously, I don't dwell a lot of it. It's more of you know me. I try to keep it light. I try to keep it humorous, always, but touch on important issues. Primarily, what George is most astounded with is what? There are women in government?
Right.
And then, of course, what do you mean there was a black president? What do you mean?
Right.
And it goes through a lot of that. And in my research, which, as you know, from all of my books, I do an amazing amount of research. I mean, to tell you the number of George Washington and Benjamin Franklin books that I've had to go through, and then, of course, tons of other things in researching them. It really did turn out that the primary members of our founding fathers, who is a wide array of men, anybody who could be seen as part of the Constitution, or the ones who signed the Declaration of Independence and every other thing that took place at the time, the educated ones of more of a liberal stance were against slavery, but they also realized that they didn't want to do anything to change that, because before we were a new country, and when we were talking about revolting against the largest power in the world at that time, we needed money. And that money needed to be donated by the people who had the plantations growing tobacco and cotton, that was supplying, oddly enough, our enemy,
Mm,
who was buying these things.
mm,
So we couldn't, or the founding fathers couldn't do anything about slavery, because if those plantation owners had to pay those workers, they wouldn't have had the money to pay for the revolution.
sure.
So I found out a lot about that. So a lot of the original founding fathers were not pro slavery. Again, you got to remember, just like a lot of kids are they say, you're it's how you grow up. A lot of these guys, the younger of them, they were born into a society and a culture with slavery. It was there when they were children, so they just saw it as part of, this is how it is, the life is. And the same thing with women. Women, regardless of the color of them, women were not, unless you were born into society or married your way into it, women were not they were looked upon just, a few steps, or if just a step above slavery, with the way that they were bought and sold and used in families, and, used for their dowries and things like that.
Sure.
So it was a different world, but I could tell you that George absolutely loves 2022.
What's
He
up?
was
he
rather
came back.
astounded.
He's here. This is a story about George Washington in the present, as if he
Yes,
was
he
here.
is. He
Okay.
is, and I won't say how, so that you can
Okay.
go out and buy the book, which I'll tell you
Right.
how to before this interview ends. He is somehow transported into the back of this writer's car in May of 2022, as the writer is driving back from a cross-country trip in Los Angeles. Kimbra, you'll be happy to know that the awards ceremony took place at the Beverly Hills Hotel.
Okay.
And
Polo Lounge.
yeah, Kimbra and I used to hang out there from time to time at the Polo Lounge.
That's one of John's favorite places to go, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
When I'm in LA, you can always
Pretty
find me.
nice. Mhm.
So anyway, he wins these fantastic awards at a level that no writer has ever won these 3 awards at the same time ever. And so he's driving back because, again, there's a whole thing about him being given first-class airline tickets, and he chooses not to use them and drives. And on his way back from Los Angeles to where he lives, oddly enough, in New Jersey, he stops to visit a friend in Philadelphia. And during his time in Philadelphia, when he leaves there late at night to drive back to New Jersey, for some reason, the GPS in his car isn't working, and he gets lost, and he winds up in the middle of a terrible storm. And again, I won't go into how or why, but lo and behold, President George Washington winds up in the backseat of this guy's car. And the next 300 pages is as enjoyable as the first 20 or so.
I like it. Sounds interesting.
Yes. So far the reports I've gotten from the reviewers and everything else is that it's a great story, and they all praised my imagination, but if you want to know what really inspired it, as I talk about in the preface of the book, and I'm sorry for taking up a lot of time here. You're not really talking much. So
Well, no,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. Go ahead, Kelly.
But you know, I grew up in Hudson and Bergen County, New Jersey, and all through that growing up stage in the area where I grew up, there is a lot of Revolutionary War sites, locations, monuments. Plus, I mean, if you think about it, right in the 10-mile radius of where I grew up in Hudson County, you know, you have the George Washington Bridge, you know, which is right there. I went to George Washington Public School. We have 3 Washington Townships in New Jersey alone. Every town had a Washington Street, Avenue, Boulevard.
Sounds very patriotic where you guys grew up.
Yes, and then of course, as you would drive around in New Jersey, not on the major highways, but on secondary roads, you'd often see, like you do in California, where it's a historic landmark and stuff like that. Well, you would see that, you know, most of it, not very promising, but many of the signs would say George Washington's retreat. It always seems like George was retreating somewhere, not going to fight somewhere.
Yeah. He's taking back.
But it didn't matter, and you know, even wherever we went, you know, there was Morristown and Princeton and Monmouth. All of these places in New Jersey had famous, which I hate to call them famous, but for what they were at the time, battles that, you know, altered the state of our country, or what would become our country.
Right.
Wow.
Well,
There you go. So that okay, so I'm surrounded by all that. And then again, as I talk about in the preface, I was very lucky as a kid. My dad, who didn't even finish high school before he had to run off and fight in a war, when he loved American and European history, but since we were in America, you know, he loved, once I was of age to understand, you know, not like 3 or 4, but like 8 or 9 or 10, when his job would have its 2 or 3 week vacation in July, he'd pack up me and my mom, and we would go to Valley Forge or Gettysburg or Williamsburg, Virginia, or, you know, various forts in upstate New York where French and Indian battles were fought, or down to Washington, D.C. itself. I mean, there was always, you know, that handful of days down at the Jersey Shore, and then a week doing something for history. And that always, and you know, that just stuck with me. So in my mind as a kid, it was always, you know, oh, this is named for this person. I wonder how this person would feel today if they saw what became of what they did, or who they are, how they are remembered, stuff like that. And as a writer, you just take it to that next step and just put it on a page and make a story about it.
and are you planning to turn this into a screenplay as well at some point?
You know, no, this is, but then I didn't plan on turning The Boss into a screenplay either. You know, that was my first book, folks.
Right.
But I didn't plan on doing that. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, I'm already like 8 chapters into the next book that I'm writing for this year. But you know, Kimbra, I would love to. I'd be honored if somebody asked me to. I'd be even more honored if someone paid me to.
Sure.
But you know, it would make a good story. But right now, with the other screenplays I have in the mix, if you know, hopefully, and the books, you know, something should happen relatively soon.
I'm touching wood, as they say.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
me
me too.
Me too. So
let's-
you're working on a new one already, another
Oh,
one
yeah,
after
yeah.
Me and George.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
to be honest with you, I was actually working on this one, whose current working title is called Up from the Skies. I was working on that a year ago after I finished with Rubdown, which is the last book that I put out. And I was working on that, and something made me think about Me and George, because I guess it would be helpful to tell your audience that I started writing Me and George in 1977.
Wow.
When I was going to college in New Jersey to take some law classes. Every time I would have to drive past, every time I would have to get into the college, I would drive past the George Washington Memorial Cemetery in Paramus, New Jersey. And of course, here I am going to college and driving past this cemetery every day, and I'm going, the hell did George Washington ever do in Paramus, New Jersey? And I wanted to find that out. And of course, by now you know me. If I want to find something out, I just go do it. So I drove up to the office of this cemetery and walked in. Now, this is trying to think. Give you, yeah. So my hair was probably about as long as it is now, and I didn't have a beard. And I went walking into the office, and I said to, I really remember this. It was two women sitting there, and it's a cemetery, and they have that organ type music crap going on in the background, and the people are very mellow and stuff. And I come walking in there, and I go, hi. Why is this called the George Washington Memorial Cemetery? And you saw this dumb look on these people's faces. They were just like,
They're
I
like,
don't know.
no one's ever asked us that before.
I was like, so don't, and me, I couldn't leave it at that. I was like, wait a minute, you work here? It says George Washington Cemetery on your paycheck. You don't want to know why? And they really didn't have a clue. And this isn't yesterday, folks. This was in 1977. And so I wanted to know more. So I don't remember exactly how, but I gave my number to my house number, folks. We didn't have cell phones yet. We didn't even have pagers yet.
Mysterious thing called landlines.
Yeah, the landline.
Phone on the wall.
But I did have an answering machine hooked up to it. But I gave them, and I said, look, I'd really like to know if you find somebody who has a concept. Okay. I don't know when, but I get a phone call. Some guy says, yeah, stop in. So I get there, and he tells me that apparently, again, during one of Washington's retreats, there was a large, where there is a cemetery now, there is a large forest or woods, and it was where Washington camped after one of his battles to lick his wounds, more or less. I guess, I don't know if they wanted I don't even remember if he told me what battle it was, but as they were there, and we're talking about 1,700 men, shouldn't say many, lots of them died, because if you were wounded, you didn't die on the battlefield from your wound, you died later. So they wound up burying a bunch of soldiers there, and the area just became known as Washington's graveyard over the years. And then as time went on, soldiers who fought for Washington in the Revolutionary War, who then later fought in the War of 1812, they wanted to be buried in Washington's graveyard. And then years later, the Civil War soldiers from New Jersey and New York wanted to be buried in Washington's graveyard. And it just became known as Washington Cemetery, and now just open to anybody who wants to pay. I even think I have some relatives there.
So that
So
shows how
that's-
curious you are. And
Yeah,
when you
that- so
when
that-
you
that
want to find something out, you
instigated
are
the
going to find
beginning.
it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that instigated the beginning of the story.
Wow.
The big thing was again, folks, I'm dating myself quite a bit, but so I literally took what I was told, and again, in my head was like, wow, wonder what George would say if he saw this cemetery and stuff like that. And so I went to the school library where they had a bank of 5 or 6 old IBM Selectric typewriters lined up against the wall with, remember, like if you go to the laundromat, you put a quarter in that slot thing and you push it in. Well, you put a quarter in the typewriter and you push a slot and you got to use the typewriter for an hour.
Wow.
So I would bring like $4 or $5 worth of quarters or something and a ream of paper and just start writing and writing and writing. So of course, that happened. And then, life got in the way a million times. And, the book always wound up as paper. It was paper. It was never a book. It was maybe 4, 5, or 6 chapters. And then I'd pull it out again in the 80s and go, oh, wow, I can write about pagers instead of just phones, and then I'd pull it out again in the 90s and go, oh, now I got fax machines and, early cell phones. And the early 2000s, I'd visit the manuscript again and I'd start rewriting it and go, oh, now I got cell phones with texting and Skype and internet. So I didn't really ever change the story about me and George. I always had to change the technology. Now the guy has a car that talks to him,
Yeah.
so it was always keeping up with, every time I went back to writing the book, it meant keeping up with the time. So like I was originally saying, I was writing this other story about a year or so ago, and something came up where I needed to say, hey, I need to put that in Me and George for something. So I opened up the Me and George file and I typed it in and I just started reading it again. And I go, this is a good story. This would be a good story. I've always said since 1977, I was going to write it. I'm just going to finish it now. And so I spent 2021 doing that. And
I think it's a good time to do it, actually, because it's maybe it'll help.
Well, everybody's so interested in politics, and it's funny. Now's the time. That's probably why you finished it. It's probably more than an accident that.
Actually, I wanted to really write it during the Obama presidency, and try to get the two together in some fashion, or him wanting to get together with Obama. And then I forget. Oh, I was touring. That was it. Those were during the good old days when I was able to tour for the other books. So I really didn't want to, and I had all the other books in my mind from the screenplays that they came from. So I just always had Me and George on the back burner. Then, of course, I didn't even know where to begin if I was going to write that book during the last presidency. I was like, no, I don't even want to go there. George will put a musket to his brain and blow his brains out or something. But yeah, so I said no, and I wrote during that time. I wrote my other books. So me and George just happened to fit now, and the fact that the other book already had several chapters started. Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm hoping that at some point during this year, as we briefly thought about it last July, when we thought we were going to be able to go out into the world normally again, I would be able to tour. But that ended real quick, I mean, the Zoom readings are fun. There's no doubt about that. But there's nothing, Kimbra, there's nothing like getting in front of an audience.
I miss flappers, because you invite such fun people.
Flap is that, the story there for Flappers itself is a great story. You know, it's a comedy club. Flappers is a comedy club in Burbank, California, folks. And a friend of mine was he's not even a comedian anymore, but he was a friend of mine. And he says, you know, you should do a reading at Flappers. And I said, what the hell is it? It's a comedy club. He says, I know the owner. You should talk to her. I was, okay, sure. Okay. I, at some point, get her on the phone. And she says to me, a wonderful woman, by the way, Barbara Holiday. She gets me on the phone and says, you want to rent one of my rooms? And I was like, no, I want to use one of your rooms and you'll make the money. And so, of course, that can get any club owner interested. And she said, what are you doing? She goes, are you a comedian? And I said, no, I'm a writer. And I want to do a reading of one of my books. And she goes, we've never had that before. And of course, they have, as you know, Kimbra, they have two rooms. They have one room that holds like, I think it was 210 people. Mm-hmm. And the other room that holds, I think, like 67 or something like that.
You use the small. I think you use
it again.
You use the small.
Yeah, we use the small. So I said to her, I says, I don't know if I could pull 210 people in, but I know I could bring 67 people in from LA. I says, she goes, well, you have to guarantee me. And I forget what the number was. It was not outrageous. I think it was something like $300. She says, you know, you got to, you know, to open the door. And I didn't want to do it during, as you know, regular times, you know, when the place would be open. I mean, I didn't want to take her business away. So I says, I want to do it on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'll be out by 3 o'clock. So you can have have your club and restaurant ready to go by 4 when you need to start getting ready. And so she says, well, I need $300 to open the room, electricity, pay a couple of waitresses, pay the chef if anybody wants food. I says, believe me, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the credit card. Don't hit it unless you make over $300 after you pay your people. And she goes, okay, that's fair enough.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
And so that was the first year when I did the boss, and I think Chris Carter introduced me that night, and Chris Carter of Breakfast with the Beatles fame, folks, and Sirius XM. But anyway, he so not only did I fill the room with 67 people, but they were outside the door. They were in the doorway. They were in the hallway, watching it on screens because they had the camera going. And at the end of the night, I said, do you need to hit my credit card? She says, not only am I not hitting your credit card, but you're welcome back here every time you write a book. And I've done 4 readings there since and never had to pay her a penny because the people just sit there and drink and eat, and we have a great time for about an hour and a half.
Yeah, John's got nice friends.
Yeah, yeah, a good following.
I always usually have some well-known people in the audience.
They're interesting. They're interesting. So I want you to tell everybody how we can get your books.
Well,
that's very important.
That's the easy part, folks. You can get Me and George, or any of my other 5 books, which can all be found in interviews right here on this show.
Kellie and Kimbra.
But let's say you can get them all simply by going to, and hopefully Kimbra will be able to put in a little thing, a screenshot or something here of the website. I'm sorry, Kellie, I'm very sorry. That'll just say, go to www.jondamore.com, and Jon is Jon, so it's JONDAMORE.com. And once you get there, you could read all about me. You could read all about all of my books. You could see pictures of me and Kimbra at the Polo Lounge.
Oh God.
And I'm just trying to, and then you can go to the buy page where you can buy a copy of Me and George, or a combination of any of my books and get a discount in the discounted combo packs. Plus, they all come signed and personalized. If none of that interests you with having to deal with my website, please feel free to go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. Pay them the exact same money, but it won't be autographed.
Oh, okay. Well, gosh, things are supposed to, I keep hearing that things are going to be opening up summer, fall. I'm not sure. We'll see.
Yeah, hopefully.
I mean,
so you can do your book tour. Have you done any traveling with this or anything, or just everything is
no, the last tour that I did was for the Delivery Man, which is now like 3 years ago. I had booked once, As Long as I Have Lips was coming out in April of 2020. So in January, I booked the tours. I booked flappers in LA and places across the country where I usually go until I get to New Jersey and New York, where it's 2 weeks of nonstop readings. And then I was even planning to go to Florida in the wintertime, because you don't want to go to Florida in the summertime to do a reading. Nobody comes out.
I know.
So I was planning on doing that. And so, of course, that's when the first COVID hit. And all of that got destroyed. And then, like I said, last year in July, we were hopefully under the assumption that things would be getting better. And by that time, I had put out not just As Long as I Have Lips, but Rub Down. So I had 2 books to promote. And I was getting ready to do that. And, by August or September, that got shot. So what do? I sit home, I listen to my music as loud as the neighbors will allow. And I turn my eyes red from time to time, and I write my books, and that's it.
Well, you're being very productive, using your time well during this COVID, because a lot of people don't know what to do with themselves. So you're pumping out books.
Seminars. I've had seminars on creative writing, that I've done for libraries and stuff. And I tell people, everybody, all of you, I'm sure even both of you have said, I got a story inside of me I want to tell. Right. Now, granted, we all have a story we all think is fantastic. The thing is, and I do this during my seminars, just tell it in a way that other people would enjoy hearing it. And it may actually lead to something. Sit there and journal, sit there and write. I go through a whole thing of, you don't have to, as you're writing it, you don't have to think that you're writing the great American novel. You don't have to correct all your mistakes. The concept of writing is to get the story in your head out of your head, so you don't have to remember it anymore, and put it onto this wonderful thing called a computer. Yeah. And the other good part of this, unlike Shakespeare times or other times, Henry Miller times or all that, is you don't have to write it from page 1 to page whatever. In this day and age, you could just stream of consciousness, put it in write separate chapters wherever it goes, and then put everything together.
Right.
Cutting and pasting is a wonderful thing. I think writing is an activity. It's like a sport. If you're going to play basketball, you have to practice shooting the hoops and practice the dribbling and practice. And writing is just, I've been told by other writer friends, just sit down and write every day, because you're practicing expressing yourself on paper in a colorful way.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be something, that other people are going to read all the time. It's just write, and practice getting it on paper.
Developing that muscle too.
Yeah.
So there you go. So thank you, ladies. This is wonderful. This is just so you know, not only is this my 3rd appearance on your show, but you are the very first ones to hear about me and George.
Ah, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited.
Audience.
We're debuting it.
Yes,
right,
yes.
You are. That's
And when is it available? When does it come out?
It will.
Oh,
It will officially be available February 22nd.
okay.
It is for the wonderfully low price of $18.50. I should have said
Great.
that.
Okay.
And to be honest, folks, if you could buy it sooner, I'm not sure exactly when you're going to show this, but if you go to the website, you can pre-order it, and it will come to you, as will all the other books that you will enjoy reading.
That's right.
So,
He's got a plethora of
Right.
books of many different genres.
thank
Yeah.
you. Yes,
Yeah.
that's very true.
Yeah.
My attorney was asking me that. My entertainment attorney asked me that last night. He says, "Is there a reason you're all over the place with your genres? You'd be a lot easier to sell if you were Stephen King and wrote the same thing over and over
Yeah.
and over." And I says, I was a musician, and that would be like every song sounding the same.
I
would hate
know.
that.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
John. We really appreciate having
Yeah.
you.
So good to see you. We'll see you the next time. Next book.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, ladies. Have
Never
a
a
great
dull
day.
moment.
Okay.
Never. I think that's the name of my next book. Take
Never
care.
a dull moment. All
Bye,
right.
John.
Be good. Thank you
See
very
you
much.
soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.